Thank you, Daniele. Let me tell you frankly that my presentation will be a little bit different from the others. Take it as a story of an experience in Italy and in some countries of the world, but specifically in Italy. Starting from a question, why did a Christian community founded in 1968 in the wake of the protest movement, part of a youth movement that sought to change the world by sweeping away the old one, whilst alternative bands sang "I Hope I Die Before I Get Old," immediately begin to care for the elderly in the suburbs of Rome? The elderly were no longer considered important in society. On the contrary, they had become the remnants of a world that no longer existed and was changing rapidly. And there were few of them. In Rome, fewer than 1 in 10 residents. Those encountered in the suburbs or in the outskirts of the city seemed like survivors from a distant past, the unchanging world of the countryside or farming villages. This is how they were described in a study from those years. I quote, "Obscure, stubborn, silent figures, peasants from Calabria, Abruzzo, and Sicily, Italy region, each with their own language and the scent of their own land." The interest shown by the young people of Sant'Egidio in this aspect of humanity, we are talking about the early 70s, went completely against the grain. How can this be explained? Pope Francis would put it well many years later by saying that reality is seen more clearly from the periphery than from the center. And that is where change must begin. But for Francis, the peripheries are not merely geographical, they are also existential. In short, change the world, yes, but starting with the poor. And in the large urban centers that were forming in the final decades of the 20th century, the elderly were the poorest of the poor. Simone de Beauvoir wrote in 1970 that for the last 15 or 20 years of his life, a man should be nothing more than a cast-off is something that exposes the failure of our civilization. Poverty due to a lack of financial resources, certainly. In the early 70s, many elderly people did not even have a pension. This was particularly true of women who throughout their lives had held only a few lowly, underpaid and informal jobs. Yet, even in 2006, 53% of pensioners in Italy were receiving less than 1,000 euros a month. But by staying close to them, accompanying them in their daily lives, we realized that the poverty of older people went beyond mere financial hardship. Poverty amongst the elderly is economic, housing-related, illness, lack of self-sufficiency, but also the loss of a social role and a lack of education. But, above all, is loneliness. Many years ago, we wrote that loneliness is one of society's great evils. So many of our cities, even though they are crowded and full of people, can resemble a desert that leaves one feeling alone. Loneliness is, to some extent, everyone's lot, but for the elderly, it is unbearable. The elderly are the ones most afflicted by loneliness. Since then, society has changed a great deal, as we are all well aware. The data, I think, is not up to date in any case. The surge in life expectancy has radically altered the demography landscape across almost the entire planet, particularly in Europe. For some years now, the belief has taken root in many people's mind that older people constitute a gerontocracy, and that through the power derived from their numbers, They are diverting precious resources away from the young people who are now few in number and increasingly neglected. In a comedy movie from a few years ago, there is a conversation between a grandmother who is swamped with commitment and has very little desire to look after her newborn granddaughter, and her daughter, a mother, who doesn't know, as they say in Rome, who to turn to for help. It means non sa chi dare i resti for the Italian who are here. The daughter says to her elderly mother, "Your generation has taken it all for itself. You were born after the war. You spent your childhood within a large and generous family network. You enjoyed the economic boom. You accumulated and squandered wealth in the 80s and 90s, thinking that prosperity would last forever. You didn't think about future generations, and you still don't, Mum. Today, with the pension money that you'll be the last to benefit from, you are enjoying life in your first and second homes, making holiday plans, investing in bonds, taking out 20 years mortgages, having spot-on health checkups, having fun on social media, and above all, believing in the future that you will be the last to experience, because you're not even going to die anymore." The elderly woman's sharp retort: "You need to understand one thing clearly, once and for all. We older people are a force, silent and calm, but if we get angry, you'll be in for a world of trouble, because there are more of us. There are loads of us. For every 100 young people, there are 165 elderly people, and that means an absolute majority. In other words, virtually the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the government of the Republic. We control the TV because we influence the programming. The advertisers around whom the world revolves are obsessed with us. The homes we own and the saving accounts on which our country's entire economy rests are in our hands. And with our pensions, we hold the entire national economy in check." This is the grandmother. This dialogue reflects a sentiment that is widespread amongst the Italian population and in public opinion, but the reality is quite different. Even today, 4.5 million elderly people are living on a monthly pension of less than €1,000, whilst life expectancy has returned to pre-COVID level, but the number of years spent in poor health is increasing. People are living longer, but partly due to cuts to the public health service, they are living worse lives. The phenomenon of foregoing treatment due to waiting times in the public healthcare system, which forces people to turn to the private sector at their own expense, is very widespread amongst the elderly. We have not reflected sufficiently of what happened during the years of pandemic. Coronavirus. Even though no global event in the last century has been so traumatic and painful, there has been a tendency to move on too hastily, almost as if it had never happened. Well, a study analyzing over 21,000 deaths across various European countries during the first phase of the pandemic found that 86.6% of these people were aged 70 and over. In Italy, according to the Istituto Superiore di Sanità, the average age of those who died was 81. Other research confirms that more than 60% of coronavirus deaths in Europe were among elderly people in residential care homes. But During those dramatic months, in many cases, age-based criteria for selective health care were applied to decide who to treat and thus save, and who not to. At the height of the crisis, Sant'Egidio publicly launched an appeal entitled "Without the Elderly, There is No Future," an appeal to rehumanize our societies. No to selective health care, in which it stated, "In many countries, when faced with the need for care, a dangerous model is emerging that favors selective health care, which regards the lives of the elderly as of secondary importance. Their greater vulnerability, advancing age, and other conditions they may suffer from are cited as justifying a form of selection in favor of the younger and healthier. To resign oneself to such an outcome is humanly and legally unacceptable." The appeal was signed by more than 100,000 people. There is another aspect worth noting which concerns cities and the quality of life. Our cities are becoming fragmented. There is the showcase city for tourists, often the historic centers. There is the city of gated communities, the residential estates of the wealthy equipped with protective barriers. And there is the city of the vast suburbs with high housing densities and poor services. These three types of city rarely intermingle. This polarization of urban spaces goes hand in hand with the neglect of public policy. Housing is no longer a social right, but merely a source of income in the free market. People work in the city but cannot live there. The housing stock is being stripped of its primary function. For many families, renting a home means spending over 40% of their income. But for people living alone and in precarious financial circumstances, the majority of whom are elderly, this figure rises to over 53%. And then there is loneliness, lingering like an unwelcome flatmate. In Italy, there are 9.7 million people living alone. Of these, 4.6 million are over 65. 1 in 3 older people lives alone. The burden older women are the most vulnerable. From the age of 75 onwards, 1 in 2 lives alone. The burden of social isolation is also increasing as vulnerable people have fewer support networks. Against, according to Istat, as many as 900,000 older people report having no one to rely on, and the situation is worse in large urban centers. As we know today, for many, living alone is a choice, feeling at ease with oneself, first and foremost. But as Zygmunt Bauman reminds us, a solitary life may be cheerful and is likely to be very busy, but is inevitably destined to be risky and terrible as well. In light of these circumstances, Sant'Egidio has been implementing 2 strategies to combat poverty amongst the elderly. The first is a program to which we wanted to give a title that speaks for itself, Long Live the Elderly. An innovative intervention strategy that responds to the many requests for help and support in daily life, but above all for companionship, so that people are no longer alone and can continue to live in their own homes. The program is based on the method of actively monitoring the entire population aged over 80 in a given area, with the aim of preventing their social isolation. It is a comprehensive initiative aimed at creating points of reference within the neighborhood and a personalized local support network around each elderly person, which can protect them from the consequences of various types of emergency. A multi-dimensional assessment is carried out for each beneficiary, which determines the quantity and quality of the service provided, home visits, follow-up phone calls, and which, of course, changes over time. It's interesting to say that the program started after the 2003 first warming canicule in Europe, because it is something to deal also with climate change. The second strategy is what we call solidarity shared homes. Ordinary homes embedded in neighborhoods where older people and other vulnerable persons can live together, share daily life, reduce costs, and rebuild bonds of proximity. Solidarity shared homes. This is something more and different from the new co-housing trends that are gaining ground in Europe, because these involve public, though more often private, solutions designed for self-sufficient people, market-based proposals accessible only to those with substantial financial resources. Solidarity shared homes, on the contrary, on the other hand, does not arise solely from housing needs. At their core, they respond first and foremost to a need for connection, the need to rebuild close-knit ties in a society increasingly characterized by individualization, domestic loneliness, the decline of neighborhood life, and fragmentation of family networks. They are homes amongst homes in the city, and they address loneliness in home and economic poverty as they enable to share of expenses, care, resources, and companionship. And they respond also to the demographic challenge, as they do not envisage a city divided by age or income, but rather socially mixed, and where possible, intergenerational homes. Just in Rome, Sant'Egidio has organized 116 such initiatives, providing shelter for 360 people, 56 of whom were elderly. Let me conclude. Aldo Moro, one of the leading figures in Italy's democratic reconstruction following the fascist era, was kidnapped and murdered by the Red Brigades during one of the most dramatic periods in Italy's history. In the People prison, shortly before his death, he wrote a final, heart-rending letter to his wife, almost a testament. In it, he wrote, amongst other things, "United in my memory, live together. I shall feel as though I am amongst you. For heaven's sake, live together under one roof. For heaven's sake, live together under one roof, if at all possible." Of course, it was a request born of the anguish of knowing that he would no longer be with them. But it seems to me that in the insistence of those words, beyond the pain and torment, there was also a message for future generations. Bonds are the most precious and important thing. To live well, we must live together. Thank you.